to discuss the legacy of George Floyd and the impact his death made is Dominic Whitehead, the Chief of Field Membership Growth and Unit Sustainability at the NAACP. Thanks for being here. Your organization posted this earlier today. 5 whole years have passed since George Floyd was murdered, and Congress still hasn't passed a single piece of legislation to address this country's policing crisis. People are dying every day as they fail to act. Enough is enough. Black Lives Matter always. Pass the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. What would meaningful change look like to you?
Thank you, Omar, for that. And meaningful change for the NAACP and for us will look like exactly what you just said. It is truly passing the George Floyd Policing Act at the federal level. We're continuing to see across the country rollbacks in states and cities across the country around police reform in this country. So for us, being able to pass that will show that this administration, this Congress understands and know the importance of what police reform looks like in this country. But most importantly, it would show and really show a piece around standing up for Black and brown Americans who's mostly impacted around police reform in this country.
And some of the major tenets of the act would be things like restricting chokeholds, no-knock warrants, changing how qualified immunity for police officers are interpreted as well. But your organization has also pointed to the rollbacks coming from the Trump administration, where just days ago, the DOJ dismissed police reform agreements in Minneapolis and Louisville, Kentucky, where Breonna Taylor was killed. The mayor of Minneapolis says his city will move forward with reforms anyway, but how important is it for the federal government to be a part of the police reform process?
It's extremely important for the federal government to be a part of the police reform process. When we think about what is happening, we know policing is happening locally across this country. But with the federal government coming in, it shows a different level of transparency. It allows us to truly reform this from a federal level. But most importantly, it'll allow this country to see things that we'll continue to see roll back, like DEI, et cetera. And so making sure that the federal government is engaged in this process and been involved in this process will shore up Americans across this country. The federal government understands what's happening on the ground in states across the country, like police reform that's needed.
Yeah. George Floyd's cousin spoke to CNN's Rosa Flores a few days ago, and she talked about his legacy and the work that still remains to be done. Take a quick listen.
He was the catalyst for this huge movement all over the world. And so I just want people just to continue to stay engaged, in whatever way they can, to make sure they're working with us to make sure he's not forgotten.
And the energy now is different than the energy was in the days after George Floyd was killed back in 2020. But what is the NAACP doing to keep people active, to keep people engaged, so the world not only never forgets, but also is able to push for something meaningful in the wake of his killing?
Yeah, as an advocacy organization, NAACP is going to stay on the forefront of continue to advocate for federal policy reform, such as the George Floyd policing reform bill, but most importantly, engaging locally and community on the ground. NAACP, we have units and branches across the country in every city, every state. And so our goal is to continue to engage locally, to continue to listen directly, continue to push Congress to move out of DC and move into the states directly, and to listen to constituents around the issues that matter most importantly to them, particularly police reform. Folks want safe neighborhoods. Folks want good policing. And so the only way to get that done is making sure that our elected officials are hearing constituents on the ground. So NAACP will continue to be a catalyst and or a vehicle to ensure advocacy for our communities is at the forefront.
And as I look at some of the latest Pew research, 72% of those polled say the increased focus on race and racial inequality after Floyd's killing did not lead to changes that improved the lives of Black people. And I wonder, just 5 years on now, what do you see as the enduring legacy of that chapter? And why do you think the findings of that study from Pew were the way that they were?
I think the findings on that study from Pew Research, are the way they were the way they were. A couple of reasons. One, when I think about democracy, we think about this country, we know Black folks and Black people are at the center of that. And so when we think about policy, when we think about changes that need to be made across the country, we know for a fact when policy and good policy is made for Black folks, right, it is typically good for the entire country. And so when we look at that data and we look at that research, I think it's imperative for elected officials. It's imperative for advocacy organizations to take a moment, look at that data, and actually build true policy around that. So I think if we want to see the legacy of not only George Floyd, but Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, the list goes on, we have to use that data. We have to look at that data and really listen to folks on the ground to really build out what we want to see.
Dominic Whitehead of the NAACP, thank you for being here. Really appreciate the time.
Oh, thank you.
All right.